Homily for the Solemnity of Christ the King, Year A. Our readings for this Sunday are from Ezekiel chapter 34, verse 11 to 12 and 15 to 17. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 20 to 26 and 28. And the Gospel of St. Matthew chapter 25, verse 31 to 46. Jesus Christ is the King of Kings, the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. In Him and through Him, everything in heaven and on earth were created. See Colossians chapter 1, verse 16. Contrary to the orientation of most worldly leaders, Jesus taught His disciples by His own example that leadership is service, and that godly leadership is service unto death. In the first reading, God is portrayed as one who cares for His people the way a good shepherd cares for his sheep. According to the second reading, at the end of the world, Christ will reign as universal King, having overcome all hostile forces, including death. The Gospel presents Matthew's great scene of the Last Judgment. The nature of rulers of the world. The rulers of the world. Earthly rulers often seek wealth, power, and prestige. They often desire to conquer territories and dominate and control people. They often have a retinue of orderlies, servants, and slaves who serve and wait on them. Worldly leaders often marry many wives and father many children. They sometimes make themselves into objects of worship, and now and again, even demanding and offering human sacrifices. The idea of human sacrifices might seem to us a terrible aberration of bygone years, but many human lives are still being sacrificed to keep some leaders who are no longer wanted, to keep them in power. The 20th century witnessed the reign of many bloody dictators in several countries across the world. They include Adolf Hitler of Germany, Joseph Tito of old Yugoslavia, Jean-Bertrand Bokassa of the Central African Republic, Haile Selassie of Ethiopia, Augusto Pinochet of Chile, Francois Duvalier and Jean-Claude Duvalier of Haiti, Joseph Mobutu Sese Seko of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Idi Amin Dada of Uganda, Sani Abacha of Nigeria, Joseph Taylor of Liberia, and Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe. The success or failure of a leader is measured by what happens when the leader is no longer there. When these kinds of leaders die or are forced out of power, their territories often disintegrate or are thrown into turmoil, largely because of their wicked deeds. Jesus' leadership as service. Jesus demonstrated that His leadership is about giving liberty to captives, letting the oppressed go free, opening the eyes of the blind, bringing good news to the poor and the afflicted, and proclaiming the Lord's year of favor. Luke chapter 4, verse 18 to 20. He said to His disciples, "You know that among the Gentiles, those they call their leaders lord it over them, and their great men make their authority felt. Among you, this is not to happen. No. Anyone who wants to be great among you must be your servant, and anyone who wants to be first among you must be slave to all. For the Son of Man Himself came not to be served, but to serve, and to give His life as a ransom for many." Mark chapter 10, verse 41 to 45. Jesus lived a life of service in poverty and humility to make us rich. He showed deep affection and care for the poor, the weak, and the oppressed. He washed the feet of his disciples, laid down his life for his sheep, died on the cross wearing a crown of thorns, just so that human beings may have abundant life in God. See Matthew chapter 20, verse 28, Luke chapter 4, verse 18, and John chapter 19, verse 10. The kingship of Christ is characterized by love and compassion, mercy and forgiveness, goodness and kindness, humility and selfless service, peacemaking and non-violence, and vicarious suffering and death. Though the world is finding it difficult to understand, this is what the reign of Christ is all about. These characteristics are the gateway to heaven. They are the hallmark of anyone who really has submitted to Christ. Christ the King will sit in judgment. The Son of Man is coming in his full majesty, accompanied by all the angels as a judge on the day of final judgment. On this day of reckoning, all the nations shall assemble before him, and he will separate the sheep from the goats. The sheep will be blessed or rewarded, while the goats will be cursed or punished. The criterion of judgment shall be how we treat him in the needy during the time in between his first coming and the second coming. The Lord, the King, identifies himself closely with all who are hungry or thirsty, malnourished or undernourished, lacking clean potable water, those who are strangers or immigrants, refugees, homeless, orphaned, or street kids, those who are living in deplorable conditions, those who are naked, deprived of human dignity, humiliated or abused in any way, those who are sick in hospital or at home, those who are in prison, in police detention, in solitary confinement, and condemned criminals awaiting execution. We know that the reason Christ is present in his word, in the sacraments, and in the worshiping community. We must know that he is also present in each one of the poor, the weak and the unemployed, the sick, the brokenhearted, the oppressed, and the victim of violence, the overburdened, the weary, the marginalized. Speaking in human terms, we can also say that God is more present with these categories of people than with those who are having a good time, because he says that these are the least of his brethren, and as we render them any help whatsoever, it is him we are helping. He shares his life with even the ugliest, the most defaced, humiliated, awkward, and broken in the human family. The final question will be, did you love me sufficiently in the hungry as to feed them? Did you see me clearly in the prisoners to visit them? Did you recognize me powerfully enough in the sick as to spend time at their bedside? And did you acknowledge my presence in the naked as to clothe them? If we wish to meet Christ the King, to see his face and hear his voice, if we wish to welcome, to love, serve, and nourish Christ the King, then we will do well to relate with the above listed people, because the presence of Jesus is hidden among the poor and the vulnerable. For Jesus, how we behave towards one another in this world has eternal consequences. Little acts of kindness, graciousness, and charity, forgiveness, and hospitality are grounds for us to be welcomed into the fullness of the kingdom. Those little acts of kindness come out of large hearts. Thus, Jesus is acknowledged when the hungry are fed, when the thirsty are offered drink, when strangers are offered hospitality, when the naked are clothed in dignity, and when the sick and the prisoners are visited. Jesus himself is touched by mercy. Their vulnerability is his vulnerability. He is present in a very special way where human needs are greatest. From a Christian point of view, therefore, there is only one real failure in life. It is the failure of love. It is love that makes the world go round. So if the world is not going round as it should, it is the failure of love. St. John of the Cross says that in the evening of our lives, we shall be judged on love. It is the quality of our love as shown, especially to the neediest, that will be the criterion of judgment. On this day, this feast day, we need to reflect on the kind of leaders we have produced for our societies and question the extent to which we have experienced servant leaders after the mind of Christ in our family lives, in politics and in governance, in offices and in churches. We need to reflect on the general motivation for leadership positions today in all spheres of life in our societies, including leadership in the family and in the church. We need to probe into ourselves and ask what kind of leaders we ourselves are individually, having been challenged by the leadership of Christ Jesus, the King of Kings. Leadership is an enormous burden. Good leaders cannot afford to sleep well if there is one person who is hungry, one person who is sick or cannot find or afford health care, or one person whose life is diminished in any way in the society. Christ is the good shepherd, the shepherd king, whose life and death are a graphic demonstration that true leadership is an exercise in sacrificial love. God bless you.